The night of the moon ceremony was cold and clear, and every wolf in the Blackthorn pack had gathered in the stone courtyard to watch the bonding rite. Torches burned along the walls, and the pale light of the full moon fell over the crowd like a blessing. At the center of it all stood Elias Draven, heir to the Alpha throne, tall and proud, dressed in the dark furs that marked his rank. Beside him, nervous and hopeful, stood Wren Sinclair. Wren was not from a noble bloodline. She had grown up on the edge of the territory, raised by a single aunt after her parents died when she was young. She worked in the pack kitchens and kept mostly to herself, never imagining that the moon would choose her as anyone's mate, let alone the future alphas. When the elder seer had called her name during the ritual, gasps had rippled through the crowd. Some looked at her with curiosity, others looked at her with open scorn. Elias felt the bond settle into his chest the moment their eyes met, a warmth and pull he had never experienced before. It should have felt like coming home. Instead, it felt like a trap closing around him. He had spent his whole life being told who he would become. His father, the current alpha, had raised him to think of the pack first, and his own heart second. Marriages among wolves of status were not just personal choices, they were alliances, and Elias had already been promised, unofficially, to Seraphine of the Ashwood pack, a match that would secure peace between two old rival territories. Everyone knew it, everyone expected it, and now the moon itself had thrown a servant girl into the middle of his carefully built future. The elders murmured, his father's jaw tightened. Elias felt every eye in the courtyard waiting to see what he would do. He turned to Wren, and even though her eyes were shining with something like hope, he found the words leaving his mouth before he could stop them. "I reject this bond," he said, loud enough for the whole pack to hear. "She is not fit to stand beside the future alpha." The courtyard went silent. Wren's face did not crumble the way he expected. Instead, something in her expression closed, like a door shutting quietly rather than slamming. She did not cry out or beg. She simply nodded once, turned, and walked away from the crowd, her back straight even as murmurs followed her. Elias told himself he had done the right thing. He told himself this for days afterward, even as a strange hollow ache settled in his chest, a constant reminder of the bond he had refused. He assumed it would fade with time. Rejected bonds always faded, or so the old stories said. But the stories were wrong. Within a week, the pack's healer noticed that the moonlight in the sacred grove had grown strangely dim during the nightly rites, as if the goddess herself had turned her face away. Small illnesses that should have healed quickly among the shifters lingered longer than normal. The elders whispered about omens. Elias ignored them, focused instead on his upcoming engagement to Seraphine, telling himself that duty mattered more than a broken bond with a girl he barely knew. Seraphine arrived a month later with her retinue from Ashwood, elegant and composed, exactly the kind of mate his father had always wanted for him. She was intelligent, well-spoken, and clearly ambitious, though there was a coldness to her that Elias tried not to notice. Their engagement was announced with great ceremony, and for a while, it seemed as though life would continue exactly as planned. Except Elias could not stop thinking about Wren. He told himself it was only guilt. He told himself that any decent person would feel bad about humiliating someone in front of an entire pack, even if the decision itself had been necessary. But late at night, lying awake in his chambers, he would feel that same hollow ache pulling at his chest, as if some invisible thread still connected him to a girl who was no longer even within pack borders. No one had seen Wren since the night of the rejection. She had left Blackthorn territory quietly, taking only a small bag of belongings, and no one seemed to know where she had gone. 3 months into his engagement to Seraphine, Elias was sent by his father to negotiate a border dispute with a smaller, unaligned pack near the eastern wildlands. It was meant to be a simple diplomatic trip, a chance to prove his readiness to lead. Instead, it became the moment his entire world shifted. While riding through the forest that separated Blackthorn territory from the wild borderlands, Elias caught a scent that stopped him cold. It was faint, carried on the wind, but unmistakable. It was Wren. He told his guards to make camp and continue without him for the day, then followed the scent alone, deeper into the trees, until he came upon a small cottage tucked against a hillside, smoke curling gently from its chimney. An older woman stood in the garden, gathering herbs into a basket. She looked up as he approached, and something in her sharp, knowing eyes told him she had been expecting someone, though perhaps not him specifically. "You're the Alpha's son," she said. It was not a question. "I am looking for someone," Elias said carefully. "A young woman. Her name is Ren." The healer studied him for a long moment before setting down her basket. "She is resting. She does not need more trouble brought to her door." Elias's chest tightened. "Please, I only want to see that she is well." Something in his voice must have convinced the healer, because she sighed and gestured toward the cottage. "She is inside. Be gentle. She has been through enough." Elias stepped through the door and found Ren sitting by a small fire, wrapped in a woolen shawl, her hands resting over a belly that had grown noticeably round. She looked up at the sound of footsteps, and when she saw him, her expression flickered through surprise, then something like fear, before settling into careful distance. "Elias," she said quietly, "why are you here?" He could not take his eyes off her rounded stomach. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "You're pregnant." Ren's hand moved protectively over her belly. "Yes." "Is it?" He could not even finish the question, though the answer was obvious. The bond between them had been real. There had been no time, no opportunity, for the child to belong to anyone else. "It's yours," Ren said simply. No accusation in her voice, only quiet certainty. "Though I never expected you to come looking." Elias sank into the chair across from her, his mind reeling. He had rejected her, humiliated her, and yet the bond had not broken cleanly, not completely. A child had come from that single night beneath the moon, before everything had gone wrong. The healer entered behind him, setting a cup of tea in front of Ren before speaking, her voice low and serious. "There is something you should know, young Alpha, something even Ren did not fully understand until recently." Elias looked between the two women. "What is it?" The healer folded her hands. "Ren's bloodline is not what it appears. Her grandmother's grandmother carried the blood of the old moon-blessed families, the ones said to be descended directly from the goddess's first daughters. That bloodline was believed extinct generations ago, lost during the Great Pack Wars. But it seems it survived, hidden and quiet, passed down through women who never knew the truth of what they carried." Elias's breath caught. He had heard the old legends as a child, stories of a sacred lineage that could restore balance to the wolf packs, capable of channeling the moon goddess's power directly. He had always assumed they were myths, bedtime stories meant to teach values, nothing more. "The child Ren carries," the healer continued, "may be the last true heir of that bloodline. That is why the moon dimmed the night you rejected her. That is why illness has lingered in your pack." A bond blessed by the goddess herself was broken carelessly, and the consequences have been building ever since. Elias felt the weight of his choice settle over him fully for the first time. It was not simply that he had hurt Ren. His pride had endangered something far greater than his own reputation. "I did not know," he said quietly. "Would it have changed your decision?" Ren asked, her voice steady, but her eyes searching his face for the truth. Elias hesitated, and in that hesitation, he found an honest answer for the first time in months. "I would like to believe it would have, but I cannot promise you that, because the truth is, I let fear of what others thought decide for me. That was wrong, regardless of who you are or what bloodline you carry." Ren studied him for a long moment, then looked away toward the fire. "I appreciate your honesty at least." Elias stayed in the borderlands for 3 days, unable to leave, despite knowing his father, and Seraphine would be waiting for news of the negotiation trip. He spoke with Ren each day, slowly, carefully, rebuilding something that had been shattered in a single careless moment. He learned about her life before the ceremony, her hopes, her quiet strength. He began to understand that his initial judgment of her had been shaped entirely by pride and status, nothing more. But peace did not last. Word of Ren's location, and her pregnancy, reached Ashwood territory through a careless comment from one of Elias's own guards. Seraphine's family, sensing an opportunity to secure influence over a bloodline of legendary power, moved quickly. Within a week, a delegation from Ashwood arrived at the healer's cottage, requesting that Ren and the unborn child be brought under their protection. citing concerns about her safety among unaligned wolves. Elias understood immediately what was truly happening. Seraphine's family wanted control of the child, not out of concern, but because whoever guided the last heir of the moon goddess would hold immense influence over every pack in the region. He rode back to the cottage immediately, arriving just as the Ashwood delegation attempted to formally request Ren's transfer under diplomatic protection. Tension filled the small clearing as wolves from two different territories faced each other, none willing to back down. Elias stepped forward, placing himself firmly between the delegation and the cottage door. "She is not going anywhere without her own consent," he said, his voice carrying the authority of his position for the first time with true conviction rather than obligation. The head of the delegation narrowed her eyes. "The Alpha's son is engaged to Lady Seraphine. Surely you understand the complications of harboring another woman, particularly one carrying a child of such significance." "I understand exactly what is at stake," Elias replied, "which is why I am ending my engagement to Seraphine, effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the small gathering. Even Ren, standing in the cottage doorway with the healer's steadying hand on her shoulder, looked stunned. Elias turned to face her fully, ignoring the delegation, ignoring the weight of his father's expectations, focused only on the woman he had wronged so publicly months before. He walked to her and, in front of everyone gathered, knelt down, a formal gesture recognized under the old pack laws as a binding apology, the only ritual capable of beginning to mend a broken mate bond. "I was wrong to reject you," he said clearly, his voice steady despite the crowd. "I let pride guide a choice that should have come from my heart. I cannot undo the pain I caused, but I am asking, honestly and completely, for the chance to make it right, not because of any prophecy or bloodline, but because you deserve to be chosen properly, and our child deserves parents who are not divided by fear." For a long moment, Ren said nothing, and Elias understood that he had no right to expect forgiveness simply because he had finally found the courage to offer it. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her hand in his, helping him to his feet. "I forgive you," she said softly. "Not because tradition demands it, but because I believe you mean it." As their hands joined, something shifted in the air around them. The moon, though it was daylight, seemed to pulse faintly overhead, a shimmer of pale light visible even against the sun, a sign witnessed by everyone present that the bond, once broken, had finally been restored. The Ashwood delegation, unable to argue against a ritual acknowledged by every pack law in the region, withdrew without the child they had come to claim. Months later, Ren gave birth to a healthy daughter, marked at birth with a faint crescent shape upon her small shoulder, confirming everything the healer had once explained. The Blackthorn elders, initially wary, came to accept the child as a blessing rather than a burden, understanding that the goddess's favor had returned to their pack alongside her. Elias did not simply return to his old position of privilege. He spent the following months earning back the trust of the pack he would one day lead, proving through actions rather than words that he had truly changed. He worked alongside Ren, learning to be present, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care, both for her and for the daughter who represented a new beginning for their people. The old stories say that mate bonds blessed by the moon cannot be broken forever, only bent, tested, and given the chance to heal. Elias Draven learned this truth the hardest way possible, through public shame and quiet redemption, through the loss of pride and the discovery of something far more valuable in its place. In the years that followed, he never again let fear decide for him, and every night, when the moon rose full and bright over Blackthorn territory, he remembered exactly what it had cost him to almost lose it, and exactly what it meant to finally get it right.